Hello and welcome to another Stephen Mendes video. We're here testing our massive polyphony setup. This is part 2 of our Polyphony for Classical Music series. And as you can see, we've got our trusty FA-06 in place here. What function does the FA-06 serve in this setup? Well, it merely provides a convenient way to trigger all the MIDI channels, either together or singly, so we can use it for testing out our polyphonic setup and getting it tuned. There is no audio output taken from the FA-06. We're just taking the MIDI output and we are sending it to the amp tone MIDI splitter. In case you don't know what it looks like, that's an amp tone MIDI splitter. It just takes in the MIDI and sends it out 4 ways. And the reason why we need the amp tone MIDI splitter in our setup is because we have 3 separate MIDI to CV converters in our rig. In case it wasn't clear to you in the first part, there are 2 MIDI interfaces, completely separate MIDI interfaces. They each have to be sent a MIDI signal. So we've got to have sufficient jacks and MIDI splitter to be able to do that. The one on the right there is serving channel 1 and 2. The MIDI interface on the left is serving channel 5 and 6. Channel 3 and 4 are being served by this MIDI interface down here on the bottom left of the cabinet. Now we've got here a Fender Chromatic Auto Tuner, so we can tune all of our oscillators automatically here without having to have any sound at all. As you can see, we've got a blue patch cable plugged into our Chromatic Auto Tuner, and the other side of that is plugged into an unused VCA, and we're going to use this unused VCA to regulate the level, because our auto tuner is not going to be able to stand the full 10 volts or 5 volts peak to peak of the oscillators. So we're going to plug the input of our tuning VCA into each oscillator in turn, and we are going to use the sine wave to tune with. Now the reason why we're going to tune all of our oscillators using the sine wave is because I guess the tuner is going to be more happy receiving sine waves than all sorts of other waveforms, which it then has to find out the frequency of anyway. And remember that all of our oscillators have to be set to the lowest 32 foot pitch, yeah? They're not in the low frequency mode, but they're in the low 32 foot range. And the reason why we have them in the low 32 foot range is so that we can regulate their octaves better later on. We can change their octaves as we need to. If there's a problem tuning with such a low frequency note, we can always just switch it up an octave or 2 using the range switch, or we can input an offset using our standards, and we can set it from there, because our standards module will give us any octave we could desire. There, as you can see, we've got it singing out, and we can easily adjust the fine frequency adjustment to actually center it on the... So this setup really makes tuning the oscillators a breeze, and in less than 5 minutes all 8 oscillators are tuned to the lowest C. Notice that on our tuning VCA, on this one, see, there it is. Now at this point I'm going to put in a good plug for synthesizers.com. Our oscillators hold their tune even through power cycles. Turn it off, turn it on again tomorrow, and it'll probably be perfectly tuned. Notice the frequency, fine frequency knobs are pretty much at the center position or just a little from the center position in all the various oscillators. It's a bit difficult to see them in all cases with all the wires. But we come over here to the other three and you can see that they're all pretty much in the zero, varying by the zero by only maybe one little stroke. I must admit that in spite of all the stuff that I've seen online about modulars, you know, not being able to make the same noise twice and all that sort of foolishness, I have found basically that the synthesizers.com is very, very repeatable. The oscillators are very steady, they're very reliable, and most of the other circuits, most of the other circuit parameters, the knobs, as long as you remember the knob settings and you remember the patch, you get pretty much the same thing. You might have to tweak it a little bit. But I love modular. Analog modular is great and it does shift slightly. And I mean, it's loads of fun plugging up the wires and sort of like pulling the plugs and plugging them somewhere else and all that sort of stuff. So, you know, by all means, get a budget, get some modules and have a go. Now let's see if we can bring in all the oscillators for a massive patch. Right now we're on, one is here, we have one going up. So if we turn on one, okay guys, that's it. With all eight oscillators sounding simultaneously. Next time we do some serious stuff.